It must be tough when she cries every night, huh? I'll take care of it, you get some sleep. My husband kindly offered as I was struggling with our daughter's severe nightly crying. It was unusual for him, who is always yelling. What was this change of heart? Thank you. Suspicious as I was, the temptation of getting some sleep was too much to resist. If only I hadn't trusted his words at that time, our daughter wouldn't have gone through what happened. My name is Chloe Stones, 32 years old. I work as a freelance writer. Originally, I worked at a newspaper, but the media industry is notorious for its grueling workload, and I wasn't confident in juggling both work and family life, so I quit after getting pregnant following my marriage. Over 5 years ago, I gave birth to my first son, Lucas. Since then, I've been a stay-at-home mom, managing household chores and parenting. My husband, Jaden, works for a trading company. His salary is good, but the job is demanding, and he often has to travel abroad. My parents live far away, and my brother is taking care of them, so it's hard to ask for their help. My in-laws live nearby, and we have a good relationship, but it still feels awkward to rely on them too much. Thus, I've been doing most of the parenting by myself since Lucas was born. However, as Lucas started going to preschool and I had some free time during the day, I began to want to work again. Despite choosing to quit my job to prioritize my family, I've always loved working. I looked for part-time jobs, but it was hard to find something that fit my schedule. If I'm to continue parenting solely by myself, I need to find a work schedule that won't be too much. Plus, I wanted to do something in my field of expertise, which is writing. That's when my former boss at the newspaper suggested freelancing as a writer. I discussed it with my husband that day. Start working. What about taking care of Lucas and the household chores? His attitude showed no interest in helping, but considering his demanding job, I kept quiet. I can do it from home, so I can manage my time. Well, as long as you don't bother me or Lucas, do whatever you want. But if you're going to make money, make sure to contribute to the household expenses. My husband made an outrageous remark. However, I was filled with joy at the prospect of working again, so I didn't pay much attention to his words. Using my connections from my days as a newspaper reporter, I started getting more work, and soon enough, I was earning a decent income. Earning my own money felt great. Eventually, I was entrusted with writing a column for a famous magazine, earning as much as a full-time employee at a regular company. Initially uninterested, my husband became thrilled as my income increased, improving our living standards, and started supporting my work. Lucas was also happy about my achievements. He would bring magazines featuring my column articles and ask me to read them to him, which was incredibly sweet. Just as my career was picking up and I was looking forward to the future, I discovered I was pregnant again. Honestly, I was worried at first about whether I could continue working. I feared I might not be able to continue my column. But the fact that we were having another precious child was an irreplaceable joy. I was about to give up my column to welcome the birth of my child, but thankfully, my editor reached out to me, saying they would wait for me to resume the series once things settled down after the birth. Mrs. Stones, your column is really popular. It'd be a shame to lose it. So, when things settle down, could you start writing again? This time, articles on parenting would be great, too. Thank you so much. Encouraged by the kind words, I welcomed the birth of my child. I named my newborn daughter Iris and found myself back in the thick of parenting once again. The first thing I noticed about having a daughter is that she is the complete opposite of my son, Lucas. Lucas hardly cried and was an easy sleeper, but my daughter turned out to be a big crier who needed to be held all day long. Since Lucas was attending preschool, we decided against going back to my hometown, and my Mill, who lives nearby, came over to help. I'm so sorry. Iris has been quite fussy, and I know it's a lot. Don't worry about it. I'll hold her as much as possible, so please take some time to rest. My Mill kept a smile as she continued to hold my loudly crying daughter. Honestly, I couldn't be more grateful. In place of my husband, who barely had time for childcare due to his demanding job, my Mill became a reliable source of help. Still, at night, aside from feeding times, she was quiet, but that changed after she turned 4 months old. She became fussy day and night. It was the typical time for infants to start crying at night. Hey, the crying is too loud. My husband quickly yelled. Even though we separated our rooms early on, in a small house, a crying baby's voice easily reaches everywhere. We've separated the rooms. She's just a baby, so what can you do? It's because you're in the living room. Go hide in the bedroom and cover yourself with blankets or something. My husband furiously hurled insults. We were in the living room trying not to wake Lucas, who was sleeping in our bedroom. How can you say that when Lucas is sleeping? Why don't you cover yourself with blankets and wear earplugs? Stop being so selfish. What did you say? I have work. Show some appreciation for me. My husband is admittedly a very sensitive person. Even a little noise wakes him up, and once awake, it's hard for him to fall back asleep. I thought he could just wear earplugs to help himself, but he claims they feel too uncomfortable, and instead of enduring a bit, he complains to others. Mom, what's wrong? Is Iris crying? Making a scene caused Lucas to wake up. It's tough on Lucas too, getting woken up like this. No, I woke up because of Dad's voice. Iris is just a baby and crying is normal, so why don't we comfort her? Listen, Lucas. Dad has to wake up early for work, and not being able to sleep is tough, you know. I wake up early for preschool, too. Mom gets up early to make breakfast, too. Why is it only tough for Dad? Ick. Never mind. After being calmly rebutted by Lucas, my husband, frustrated, muttered something under his breath and went back to his room. Mom, are you okay? I'll comfort Iris. Lucas is surprisingly composed and kind for a child of a sensitive father. Thank you, Lucas. Iris has stopped crying now. That's great. Lucas, smiling gently, was already a great big brother. Honestly, the baby seems to prefer her brother over her father, calming down whenever Lucas strokes her head. I really wish I could make my husband take a page out of his son's book. And so, every time Iris cried at night, my husband would become furiously angry, day after day. One day, he threw things around the house, and on another, he vented his frustration on the sofa right in front of me. At my suggestion, my husband even visited a psychiatrist and got prescribed medication. But it had no effect, and my husband, disappointed with the lack of improvement, took out even more stress on me. To be honest, the stress from my husband's verbal abuse and attitude was far greater than the stress from my daughter's nightly crying. It made my heart race and bringing on bouts of hyperventilation whenever the crying started. I even suggested that he stay at his parents' house nearby until the nightly crying phase passed, but he refused. A husband working hard and coming home only to find he can't return to his own house. That's unacceptable. It's just stubborn pride and illogical reasoning, yet the night crying continued nearly every day. Every day continued with big fights, leaving both me and my husband exhausted. It's a vicious cycle. This can't go on. It's undoubtedly the worst environment for our son. If Jaden won't leave, then maybe it's time for us to move out. I suggested separating. We could rent an apartment nearby, so Lucas wouldn't have to miss preschool. But Jaden rejected even that. It'll cost extra money, and who's going to do the cleaning, laundry, and cook my meals? Do it yourself. You're making a big deal out of Iris crying, and that's why I want to leave the house. Can't you at least try to cooperate? Making a big deal. You're making it sound like it's all my fault. It's because you're bad at putting her to sleep. It's a mess. Lucas didn't cry at night, so you should be able to handle it this time too. Just seeing the baby's face makes me so angry I can't stand it. How can you say such things about your own daughter? I yelled, incredulous. The conversation went nowhere, with neither of us willing to give an inch. At that moment, Lucas, who should have been in another room, appeared with a sad look on his face. Mom, Dad, are you guys fighting? Yo, Lucas. It's nothing, sorry. I try not to fight in front of Lucas. I attempted to smile it off, but he seemed to have noticed. Next time Iris wakes up, can you wake me up too? I'll help soothe her. Iris smiles when I'm with her. I'm her big brother, so I'll do my best. Lucas. What a kind and warm-hearted child. Even Jaden, who adores his son, was silenced by this stark contrast. Lucas might manage, but you can't, right? That's why we're leaving the house. I stress my point, and he remains silently frustrated. A few days later, as I was preparing for moving, Jaden appeared during one of Iris' night crying episodes. I braced myself for complaints, but he surprisingly offered a smile and a helping hand. Must be tough with the nightly crying, huh? I'll take over tonight, you get some sleep. What's with this sudden change? Don't look at me like that. I've been thinking. Perhaps he was moved by what Lupus said. It was the first time he had offered to soothe her himself. Honestly, I was suspicious and anxious. Yet, there was hope that he might have reflected on his actions and the temptation of a good night's sleep for the first time in months. I couldn't just dismiss his offer. Thank you. Are you sure? Yay, go to sleep. Deciding to trust Jaden, I was able to sleep soundly for the first time in a while that night. The incident happened the very next day. Morning came, and Iris was nowhere to be found in her room. Checking Jaden's room, I found only him, sleeping contentedly without any sign of Iris. In a panic, I called the in-laws, but she hadn't been taken to their house. Iris, where are you? In my frantic state, I forgot to wake Jaden and searched the entire house. Then, glancing at the balcony, a familiar piece of clothing caught my eye. Hesitantly stepping outside, I couldn't believe my eyes. No. Iris. There she was on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket but left on the cold floor. I picked her up with trembling hands, her body cold as ice. The season was nearing winter, and the nights were getting colder. No way, Iris. Why here? My precious daughter, why? Desperately calling out to her and rubbing her body, I realized she was still alive. After that, I acted faster than I could believe myself capable of. I rushed into the house to warm up my daughter while calling an ambulance. I hurriedly got Lucas dressed after waking him up and called his preschool to report his absence. Then, together with Lupus, I boarded the ambulance that arrived. The doctor, understanding the situation, examined my daughter with urgency. It turned out that her body temperature had dropped dangerously low temporarily, but after receiving treatment, her life was saved. She would need to stay in the hospital for about a month for rest, but there was no need to worry. Thank goodness, truly. While shedding tears, I knelt down, regaining some composure. Then, what welled up was intense anger towards Jaden. No, rather hatred. He was supposed to be taking care of her, so why was she left out on the balcony in danger? Unable to let it go without directly having a talk, I called him in a rage, demanding he come to the hospital immediately. About an hour later, Jaden appeared, looking guilty. Don't be so mad. It's not even midwinter, no big deal. What? You put her in a dangerous position, and a month in the hospital. I couldn't help but raise my voice at my husband's unbelievable words. I don't want to waste my time talking to you, just answer me this. Why did you let Iris go through such an ordeal? Iris' night crying was torturous, and Lucas looked at me with disdain, not to mention our constant fighting. To top it off, you said you'd leave the house. I thought it was all Iris' fault, so I didn't want to keep her in the house anymore. So you left her on the balcony to die. You're exaggerating. I wrapped her in a blanket, didn't I? This man was impossible to talk to. I couldn't stand sharing the same space with him any longer. Let's get divorced. I can't live another day with someone who would put their child through this. I'm fine with being freed from the night crying, and I welcome the divorce. But I'm taking custody of Lucas, you know. What? No way I'm letting you. Despite being in a hospital, we ended up arguing loudly. People around us gave us cold looks. Then, Lucas came over, escorted by a nurse. I had forgotten I'd only asked her to watch him during the phone call. As I was profusely apologizing, Jaden smirked at Lucas. Lucas, you want to live with Dad even if Mom's not around, right? I'll buy you all your favorite things. Jaden tried to win over Lucas as soon as the nurse left. However, Lucas's response was unexpected. Dad, you were mean to Iris, right? I'm her big brother, and I don't like people who are mean to her. So, I hate you, Dad. Lucas, don't say things like that. I will protect Mom and Iris. We don't need Dad. Despite his pathetic pleading, my son firmly declared his hate, leaving him deeply dejected and silent. Later, my in-laws, having learned of the situation, rushed over and apologized profusely. My parents also came from afar, taking care of Iris and Lucas while we discussed a divorce. Chloe, we're so sorry. We never imagined it would come to this. I later learned that Jaden had discussed Iris' night crying with his parents, and they had advised him to face the challenge together with me, rather than running away. In times like this, the mother suffers the most. However, that led to the reason why Jaden refused the option of returning to his parents' home. My kind in-laws apologized profusely and supported my decision to divorce, even if it came to that. Eventually, Jaden and I finalized our divorce. My anger wasn't satisfied by the divorce alone, so I decided to report him to the police. What my ex-husband did to Iris constituted child neglect, but thankfully, Iris survived. The fact that he had wrapped her in a blanket was taken into consideration, and he ended up with a suspended sentence. It wasn't satisfying, but that's the reality of the law, I suppose. After the divorce, we continued living in the same apartment. My in-laws provided a generous amount for alimony, so we wouldn't have any financial troubles for the time being. All that's left is for me to restart my work, and then I can support my son and daughter on my own. However, my ex-husband, now freed by the police, had the audacity to contact me, wanting to pick up his belongings. After informing my in-laws, I decided to let him into the house just once. "Hey, my belongings. Over there." I had moved all the belongings he left behind to the balcony. "Don't be spiteful, you've got a nasty personality," he grumbled as he went out to the balcony. That's when I seized the moment to lock the door. "Hey, what are you doing? Open up. Spend the night out there and get a taste of what Iris felt. Oh, and by the way, I've got the approval of your father and mother. If you catch a cold, maybe they'll help you out." With that, I left the house with my son and daughter. "Hey." His desperate voice echoed long after. The next morning, my ex-husband was rescued by my mother-in-law after catching a cold. I'd like to think he learned his lesson, but I doubt a man like him is capable of reflection. Still, it felt good to avenge my daughter. After her discharge from the hospital, my daughter completely recovered. And miraculously, her night crying stopped entirely. Maybe it was the absence of a yelling father and a more peaceful living environment that did the trick. Babies are more perceptive and sensitive than we think. If you want a baby to have a peaceful time, perhaps the best thing is for the mother to spend her days with a smile.